It was the afternoon of April 7th, 1844. The wind was whipping off the Mississippi River, cutting through the grove in Nauvoo, Illinois, where nearly 20,000 saints had gathered. The air was thick not just with the chill of early spring, but with a palpable sense of expectancy and mourning. A man named King Follett, a faithful friend and older member of the community, had died unexpectedly in a crushing accident while working on a well. The saints were shaken. They were weary from persecution, weary from building a city out of a swamp, and weary from the constant physical toll of pioneer life. They looked at their own calloused hands, their aging bodies, and the fresh graves of their children, and they asked the question that has haunted humanity since the beginning of time. Is this crumbling vessel of flesh all there is? Joseph Smith stood up to address that crowd. He had to shout to be heard over the wind, yet the power of his voice seemed to still the elements in the hearts of the listeners. What he delivered that day is now known as the King Follett Discourse, widely considered the greatest sermon of his life. But it wasn't just a funeral eulogy. It was a radical unveiling of the architecture of eternity. Joseph looked out at that sea of tired faces, faces lined with the sun, backs bent by labor, and he didn't offer them platitudes. He offered them a vision of eternal aging, a concept so profound it flips our understanding of biology on its head. He taught that while the body may wither, the spirit is designed to do the exact opposite, to grow in light, intelligence, and capacity until it bursts the bands of death. Today, we are going to walk through 10 specific truths revealed in that discourse and the surrounding revelations of the restoration. These are not just theological points. They are the survival guide for anyone who has ever looked in the mirror and seen a new wrinkle, or felt a new ache, and wondered if their best days were behind them. I promise you, by the time we reach the end of this journey, you will understand why your spirit is only getting younger. Pay close attention to the second truth we discuss, the morning of the resurrection, because it answers the most terrifying question parents have about the afterlife. But first, we must understand the context of the promise Joseph made that day, that all your losses will be made up to you. Let us begin with the first great truth, which serves as the foundation for everything else, the paradox of the two men. The Apostle Paul touched on this when he wrote that though our outward man perish, yet the inward man is renewed day by day. But Joseph Smith took this from a metaphor to a literal reality. We live in a world that worships youth. We spend billions of dollars trying to reverse the clock, to smooth out the skin, to keep the body functioning at peak performance. When we fail, we feel a sense of diminishing value. But the restored gospel teaches that this physical decline is actually a necessary mechanism for spiritual expansion. Think of a walnut shell. As the fruit inside ripens and expands, the shell must eventually crack and fall away to release the potential within. Consider the story of Elias, a man who lived in Nauvoo during that time. Elias was a stonemason, one of the men carving the sunstones for the temple. At age 65, his hands were no longer the dexterous tools they once were. Arthritis had curled his fingers like dried roots. He could no longer hold the heavy mallet with the precision he once had. He felt useless. He felt that his time of contribution was over. One evening, sitting by the river, he confided in a friend that he felt his life was shrinking. But under the lens of this first truth, Elias was looking at the wrong man. His outward man was indeed perishing. The machinery was breaking down. But his inward man, his spirit, had spent 65 years acquiring patience, learning the geometry of holiness, understanding the texture of sacrifice. His spirit was more robust, more athletic, and more powerful than the spirit of the 20-year-old apprentice who had replaced him. Joseph taught that we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are beings of eternal intelligence currently housed in a tabernacle of clay. The aging of the clay does not diminish the fire of the intelligence. In fact, the cracking of the clay often lets more of the light shine through. When you feel your body failing, you are not dying. You are ripening. You are preparing to shed a chrysalis that can no longer contain the glory you are becoming. This brings us to the second truth, the one that answers the deepest ache of the human heart, the reality of the morning of the resurrection. This is the point that changes everything about how we view death and separation. In the King Follett sermon, Joseph Smith addressed the mothers in the congregation. Nauvoo was a place of high infant mortality. Malaria and exposure had taken hundreds of children. Mothers were terrified that if they died and were resurrected, their babies would have grown up without them in the spirit world, or worse, that they would be resurrected as adults and the mothers would never get to hold their infants again. They feared they had lost the privilege of raising them. Joseph looked at those grieving women and declared a doctrine that had been lost for centuries. He told them that in the resurrection, they would receive their children back exactly as they laid them down. Imagine a woman named Martha. She sat in the congregation that April day, her arms empty, her heart still bleeding from the loss of her 2-year-old son, Samuel, just 3 months prior. She was haunted by the idea that in eternity, Samuel would be a stranger to her, a grown man she never knew. Joseph's voice cut through the wind. As the child dies, so shall it rise from the dead, and be forever living in the learning of God. He taught that the resurrection restores the body in its perfect frame, but it respects the developmental stage of the departure. Martha would not meet a stranger. She would meet her toddler. But here is the magnificent part. She would then have the privilege, in a perfected world free from sickness and death, to raise him. She would watch him grow to the full stature of his spirit. The bond was not broken. It was suspended. This truth tells us that the resurrection is not a hard reset that wipes away our history. It is a restoration of our specific relationships and the opportunities we were denied. For anyone who has lost a child or a parent who suffered from dementia, this truth offers the assurance that you will see them again, not as a vague spirit, but as the person you knew, restored to their prime, ready to continue the journey with you. The third truth deepens our understanding of what it means to be restored. It is the principle of celestial restoration. We often think of restoration as simply fixing what is broken, like gluing a vase back together. But the restoration Joseph taught, based on the Book of Mormon prophet Alma, is far more dynamic. Alma teaches that restoration means to bring back good for that which is good, and righteous for that which is righteous. It is not just a return to a previous state. It is an elevation to a glorified state. When you repair a bone, the point of the break often becomes stronger than the surrounding bone. In the spiritual economy of God, the things that break us, illness, tragedy, aging, become the very sites of our greatest glory in the resurrection. Think of a man we'll call Marcus. Marcus struggled for years with an addiction that ravaged his health and cost him his marriage. He repented, he fought his way back to the light, but he carried the physical and emotional scars of those lost years. He walked with a limp, and his face bore the lines of regret. He often wondered if he would be a second-class citizen in heaven, forever marked by his past failures. The truth of celestial restoration says no. The repentance and the struggle Marcus endured did not just erase the sin. It built a reservoir of empathy, humility, and reliance on Christ that a person who never struggled might not possess. In the resurrection, Marcus's body will not just be healed of the limp. It will be glorified by the strength he developed in overcoming. The scars of our mortality, when submitted to the atonement of Jesus Christ, become like the wounds in the Savior's hands, not marks of shame, but badges of honor and evidence of love. Your aching body is keeping a scorecard of your faithfulness, and every pain borne with patience is an investment in a more glorious glory hereafter. This leads us naturally to the fourth truth, the polishing of the soul. Joseph Smith famously said, "I am like a huge, rough stone rolling down from a high mountain, knocking off a corner here and a corner there. Thus I will become a smooth and polished shaft in the quiver of the Almighty." We often view the trials of aging, the loss of mobility, the loss of hearing, the loss of independence as tragic inconveniences. But what if we viewed them as the final stage of polishing? When you build a temple, you don't put the raw, rough stones on the face of the building. You cut them, you sand them, and you polish them until they can reflect the light. Let me introduce you to Elena. Elena was a woman of immense capacity in her youth. She ran a farm, raised 7 children, and served everyone in her neighborhood. Now, at 80, she is confined to a bed. She requires help to eat. She feels her dignity is being stripped away layer by layer. She cries out, "Why is God keeping me here? I am useless." But under the light of the fourth truth, Elena is in the finishing room of the master architect. The patience she is learning now, the humility of allowing others to serve her, the quiet hours spent in prayer because she can do nothing else. These are polishing her spirit to a brilliance she could not have achieved when she was busy running the farm. The eternal aging process is about refining the spirit so that it can bear the weight of glory. If we were to enter God's presence with rough edges, we would not fit in the celestial structure. The trials of our twilight years are the final sanding that makes us ready to be pillars in the temple of our God. The fifth truth is one of the most mind-expanding concepts Joseph ever taught: the co-eternal nature of intelligence. In the King Follett discourse, Joseph thundered against the idea that God created us out of nothing. The mind or the intelligence which man possesses is co-equal with God himself, he declared. He explained that intelligence, the core of who you are, was not created or made, neither indeed can be. You have always existed. You are not a fleeting spark that appeared for a few decades and will then vanish. You are an ancient, eternal being. This perspective shifts the weight of aging entirely. If you have existed for eons before this life, and will exist for eons after, then this brief period of mortality, with all its aches and pains, is merely a blinking of the eye. Consider the implications of this. It means you are not your body. You are a driver inside a vehicle. When the vehicle gets a flat tire or the engine starts to smoke, it doesn't mean the driver is dying. It just means the car is wearing out. We have a young man in our story, Thomas, who was paralyzed in an accident at age 20. For 50 years, he sat in a chair. To the world, he was a tragedy. But Thomas understood this fifth truth. He knew his intelligence was not paralyzed. He spent those 50 years devouring books, praying, counseling others, and developing a mind that was sharp as a diamond. He knew that his self, his eternal identity, was untouched by the paralysis of his legs. When we realize we are co-eternal with God, we stop panicking about the decay of the flesh. We realize that we are merely passing through a school, and the classroom is falling apart, but the student is ready to graduate. We have now traversed half of these truths, and before we descend into the final 5, which deal with the nature of God himself and the practical power of this knowledge, I want to pause. I want you to take a breath and look at your own life. Perhaps you are the one feeling the weight of years, or perhaps you are watching a parent fade away. It is heavy, it is real, and it is okay to grieve the loss of what was. But I invite you now to ask yourself, what if the loss is actually a trade? What if you are trading physical agility for spiritual mass? I want you to think of one specific thing you feel you have lost: your energy, a loved one, a dream, and hold it in your mind as we move to the next point, because Joseph Smith made a specific promise about that exact thing. If these truths are resonating with your spirit, if you feel that vibration of hope, I invite you to subscribe and walk with us. We are building a community of people who are choosing to see eternity in the everyday. Share in the comments below. What is the loss you are trusting God to restore? Let's bear that burden together. Now, hold that loss in your mind, because the sixth truth is directed squarely at you. It is the law of divine compensation. This is perhaps the most quoted and cherished concept to emerge from Joseph's teachings on that April day. He said, "All your losses will be made up to you in the resurrection, provided you continue faithful." Read that again. All your losses. This is not a partial reimbursement. This is a divine guarantee of total restitution. This applies to the leg lost in the war, the sight lost to disease, the child lost to miscarriage, and the years lost to depression or mental illness. Let's look at David. David was a musician, a pianist of extraordinary talent. In his 40s, he developed a degenerative nerve condition that took away his ability to play. The music was locked inside his head, but his hands could no longer release it. It was a torture of the soul. For decades, he lived in a silent world. Does the law of compensation mean David will simply get his hands back? Yes, but it means more. It means that the music he would have played, the growth he would have experienced, and the joy he would have created are not gone. God, who transcends time, has stored up those potential realities. In the resurrection, David will not just be able to play. He will be an even greater master, having learned the discipline of silence and the longing of the soul. The law of compensation suggests that God calculates the interest on our suffering. The greater the hollow carved out by sorrow, the greater the capacity to be filled with joy. If you are feeling cheated by life, hold on. The accountant of heaven has not closed the books yet. The seventh truth challenges the very definition of God and, by extension, our ultimate destiny, the corporeal nature of God. Joseph Smith stunned the world when he taught, God himself was once as we are now, and is an exalted man, and sits enthroned in yonder heavens. He taught that, if you were to see him today, you would see him like a man in form. Why does this matter for aging? Because traditional Christianity often views the body as a prison, something to be escaped so we can become formless vapors of spirit. If that were true, then aging would be the happy process of the prison walls crumbling. But Joseph taught that the body is not a prison. It is a temple. It is the form of God. This changes how we treat our aging bodies. We don't despise them. We reverence them. We are growing up to be like our Father. A child does not despise his body because it is small and weak. He knows he is growing into the stature of his Father. Our physical trials are the growing pains of godhood. When we see the elderly, we should not see decay. We should see a being who is close to the threshold of a majesty we cannot comprehend. This truth dignifies the human form. It means that your hands, your face, your eyes, they are modeled after the divine. The wrinkles are not errors. They are part of a process that leads to a glorified, tangible physical immortality. We are not shedding our humanity. We are perfecting it. The eighth truth brings comfort to the lonely, the eternity of relationships. In D&C 130, written just a year before the King Follett sermon, Joseph taught that same sociality which exists among us here will exist among us there, only it will be coupled with eternal glory. Aging is often a process of isolation. Friends die, spouses pass on, and the circle shrinks. The fear of being alone is potent. But the doctrine of the kingdom is that relationships are the core currency of eternity. The sealing power, the authority to bind on earth and in heaven, ensures that the network of love we build here is permanent. Let's speak of Margaret. Margaret is 90 years old. She lives in a nursing home. Her husband has been gone for 10 years. Her children visit when they can, but she spends hours staring at the wall. She feels the memories slipping away, like water through her fingers. She fears that she will simply fade into oblivion, unremembered and unloved. But the truth of eternal sociality tells Margaret that her husband is not gone in the sense of ceasing to care. He is preparing a place for her. The love they shared is a sealed bond that death cannot break. When she closes her eyes for the last time here, she will open them to a reunion that is joyous, familiar, and tangible. We do not age out of love. We do not age out of family. The empty nest is a temporary earthly condition, not an eternal one. In the Father's house, the house is always full. The ninth truth is the physical reality of the resurrection. It is crucial to understand that Joseph Smith did not teach a metaphorical resurrection. He taught a literal recombination of element and spirit. He taught that there is no such thing as immaterial matter. All spirit is matter, he said, but it is more fine or pure. This means that the spiritual world and the physical world are not two different realities. They are part of one continuous spectrum of reality. Why is this hopeful? Because it validates our physical experience. The pain you feel is real, but the healing will be just as real. It won't be a dream. You will feel the grass of the celestial kingdom under your feet. You will taste the fruit of the tree of life. You will embrace your loved ones with arms that have muscle and warmth. This is not a ghostly existence. It is a more abundant life. For the young man who lost his leg to cancer, this means he will run again, literally run. For the woman who lost her sight, she will see colors she never imagined. The resurrection is the ultimate victory of life over entropy. It is the promise that biology is not the boss. God is. Finally, we arrive at the 10th truth, the vision of the youthful spirit. Joseph Smith taught that God is more intelligent than all. As we draw closer to God, we increase in intelligence, light, and truth. And here is the secret. In the kingdom of God, innocence and wisdom are not opposites. In this world, we tend to think that to be wise, you must lose your innocence, you must become cynical and hardened. But in God's presence, as we age eternally, we become more innocent, more full of wonder, more alive, while simultaneously becoming infinitely wise. This is what it means for the spirit to get younger. It strips away the cynicism, the weariness, and the heaviness of sin. Imagine a graph. One line represents your physical body. It goes up, peaks, and then crashes down toward death. But there is another line, your spirit. If you are following the path of discipleship, that line goes up and never stops. It crosses the line of physical decline and keeps ascending. You can be physically frail but spiritually a giant. You can be bedridden but traveling the cosmos in your prayers and understanding. This is the goal of our lives, to ensure that when the body fails, the spirit is just hitting its stride. We are training for a marathon that begins the moment our heart stops beating. So let us look back at the map we have unfolded. We started in the windswept grove in Nauvoo, standing over the grave of King Follett. We have traversed 10 peaks of truth, the paradox that the inward man renews as the outward man perishes. The morning of the resurrection, where mothers receive their babes. The celestial restoration, where broken things are made better than new. The polishing of the soul, turning rough stones into temple pillars. The co-eternal intelligence, reminding us we have always existed. The law of compensation, promising that every loss is a deposit in heaven's bank. The corporeal God, sanctifying our physical form. The eternity of relationships, assuring us we are never truly alone. The physical reality of resurrection, promising a tangible joy. The youthful spirit, revealing that we are growing into light, not fading into darkness. My friends, the gray hair is a crown of glory if it is found in the way of righteousness. The slowed step is just a change of pace that allows for more contemplation. The message of Joseph Smith, echoing the Savior himself, is that death has been conquered. Not just canceled, but conquered and turned into a victory march. You are not a fading echo. You are a rising sun. The clouds of aging may obscure the light for a moment, but the sun is still there, burning brighter than ever. When you look in the mirror tomorrow morning, do not look at the decay. Look into your own eyes. See the intelligence that has been there for eons. See the wisdom you have gathered. See the patience you have forged in the fires of affliction. That person, the one behind the eyes, is fresh, vibrant, and just getting started. Do not fear the passing of time. Embrace it as the polishing process it is. Live with the certainty that the best is not just yet to come. It is already bubbling up inside you, waiting for the day when the mortal shell falls away and you step into the morning of the resurrection, young, free, and glorious forever. If this message has lifted your spirit, I ask you to share it with someone who needs hope today. Maybe someone in a hospital bed, or someone grieving a loss. Be the voice that reminds them of the morning. And remember, the tomb is empty, the promise is sure, and your losses will be made up to you. Until we meet again, keep your eyes on the horizon.